We're heading into a new section of the book, a new part, and it's called the Woliska Salt Mine. And this part spans from 1943 into 1944. Chapter 13. One morning at roll call, I was one of 50 prisoners pulled out of the ranks and loaded onto a truck. The Nazis didn't tell us where we were going. They're taking us away to kill us, one of the men said. But that didn't make any sense. Amon Goth had no problem killing any of us in Plaszow. Why bother to load us onto a truck and take us somewhere else to kill us? Just looking around at the others the Nazis had chosen, I could tell we were the strongest men at Plaszow, or at least the furthest from becoming Musselmanners. I was sure we were being taken somewhere else to work, and I was sure it had to be better than Plaszow. My 2 weeks saving my strength under the floorboards of my barrack had saved me. The truck pulled outside a building with a tall spire like a bell tower, but this was no church. The place had an industrial look to it. Oil-covered motors and generators stood around like sentinels, and train tracks led into and out. Let's look and see what it says sentinels are. Sentinels are a soldier or a guard whose job is to stand and keep watch. So it's figurative. It's something that appears like a guard. So these oil-covered motors and generators look like they remind him of guards guarding the place that they are. The Nazi in charge of our truck unloaded us, and we joined another group of prisoners who'd been brought in from somewhere else. I ended up standing next to a man who looked familiar to me, but I couldn't place him. Are you from Krakow? I asked him. No, he said, with surprising force. I am no one. He was right, of course. I shouldn't even have asked, but I noticed two of the other men who came with me from Plaszow looking at him more intently now. First, we will take you into the mine to show you where you will be working, Chpt told us. Then you will be assigned to your barracks. We were marched into the factory, which wasn't a factory after all. It was the sheltered entrance to an enormous mine. In groups of 10 and 12, we boarded elevators. I got on with the familiar-looking man and the two prisoners from Plaszow who'd been watching him. They stood close beside him now, uncomfortably close, but he didn't say anything. He just stared at the floor. The elevator ka-chunked, and down, down, down we went. Electric lights on the open elevator cage illuminated the gray-white walls of the mine shaft as we descended. Suddenly, I was reminded of being under the floorboards again in Plaszow. I was squeezed in, underground, trapped, in the dark, with death coming in for me. Salt, one of the other prisoners whispered. The Woliska salt mine. It has to be. My trance was broken. I reached out my hand to touch the wall and tasted my fingers. It was true. The walls were made of salt. The elevator car hit bottom, and we were guided through a labyrinth of tunnels and small chambers. I know you guys have probably heard the word labyrinth before, but it's a complicated, irregular network of passages or paths, which is difficult to find one's way out of, a maze. We marched down salt stairs. You'll be working room 47, our capo told us, level 7. We marched down salt stairs. We crawled along salt floors. We passed stalagmites formed from salt water dripping off the ceiling. Now, guys, stalagmites are the sharp, in a cave, the sharp, pokey, like icicles, but they're the ones coming up from the floor. They're pushing up with all their might. So the drips build one on top of each other of the minerals and build up, like they look like the bottom part of teeth on a monster to me. The mine was like a strange dream world. Very soon we left electric lights behind and could only see as far ahead of us as our capo's carbide headlamp. Carbide is a binary compound of carbon and an element of lower or comparable electronegativity, but it gives off, they burn it. It's like you strike a match. Maybe you're thinking it would be easy to slip away in the tunnels, our capo told us. Maybe you're thinking it would be easy to escape into the darkness. There are 9 levels, 300 kilometers of tunnels. Maybe you're thinking we would never find you. The capo stopped and turned his headlamp on us. You're right. We wouldn't find you. You would be lost forever in a maze blacker than night, with nothing to eat but salt and nothing to drink but salt water. If I were you, I wouldn't get lost, either on purpose or by accident. We all followed closer behind him the rest of the way. The capo showed us the room where we would be working, the picks and shovels we would be using, the carts we would fill with them. The other prisoners who worked the mine were already back in their barracks asleep. We would get up with them before the dawn and come right back here to work without a full night's sleep. Just the thought of it made my arms and legs ache. The capo took us out a different way, through a vast chamber where every footstep echoed. One of the men in front of me stumbled, and a piece of salt clattered off a wooden boardwalk beneath us and splashed. Water? There was an entire lake under here. It rippled and glimmered black in the light from the capo's lamp. Up more steps we went, and another elevator, until we came to another huge chamber, this one lit with electric light again. Here, there was no lake, but something even more amazing. Statues, dozens of figures, all carved out of salt. And the lights in the ceiling, they were chandeliers. Chandeliers made of salt. After so many months and years of dirty streets and peeling paint, of gray uniforms and Spartan barracks, it was astounding that there could still be beauty in the world, especially here, a mile underground. And think about it, it's been so long since he's seen anything pretty or pleasant. It shocks his senses to see something pretty and pleasant. The workers, the miners, they did this, whispered the man who told me the name of the mine before. Some of these statues are 1,000 years old. There were trolls and serpents and gnomes. There were Polish knights and kings and queens. I wish they could somehow magically come to life and free us, save us. They stayed still, though, frozen in salt, as trapped and helpless as we were. The last room was another monument left by former miners in Waleska's happier past. It was a temple, a chapel, no, an underground cathedral. There were more statues, an altar, a rail, everything a Catholic needed to hold services. But praying hadn't done the miners any good either. The Nazis owned almost all of Poland now, even 300 meters underground. Night had fallen and the stars were out when we got back topside. We were taken to our barracks, which were no better than our last at Plaszow. Because we'd missed dinner, we were sent to bed without any food. We knew better than to complain, and most of us went to our beds as quickly as we could. Morning, as we all knew, would be there before any of us were ready for it. But the 2 men who'd been looking strangely at the man I thought was familiar cornered him once the capo was gone. "Your name is Holtzman, isn't it?" one of them said. "No," the familiar-looking man said. My name is Finkelstein. "You were in Krakow, weren't you?" the other men said. "You were one of the Judenrat's policemen." Of course. That's where I remembered him. How could I have forgotten that face? He was the man who had brought the Nazi to my flat, the one who had stolen everything else from us while the Nazi took my mother's ring. I remembered my mother's eyes that day, the emptiness that had never completely gone away. I'd been so scared, so protective, that I hadn't even felt anger. I did now. "No," the policeman said. There was panic in his eyes. "My name is Finkelstein. From Zilonki." "Quiet in there," a capo's voice shouted from outside. The 2 men said nothing more to the policeman, but they watched him all the way back to their bunks. That night, I could hear the man crying softly in his bed until someone hissed at him to shut up. Now, remember we said the Judenrat, they felt powerful. Some of them let it go to their heads, but in the end, when the Nazis were finished with them, just like everybody else, when they had used them all they needed them, used them up, they were still just Jews, and they got the same fate. So some of them, like this guy, the one who stole all Yannick's food, they found themselves like being a police officer, a corrupt police officer in prison with criminals he put in prison. They were in there where he could be victimized by them in the same way that He had victimized them. The morning was cold, with only lukewarm coffee-flavored water to fight off the chill. It was colder still underground, where it was always damp and the sun never shone. The low ceiling made us all walk like old crones, and I noticed that even when they could, some of the old-timers never stood up straight anymore. Their backs were permanently bent. I was given my own carbide light, my own pickaxe, and my own place to work. It was heavy work and boring. There was nothing to it but swinging my pickaxe again and again, breaking off big chunks of salt that another prisoner shoveled into a donkey cart. I chipped away, my arms already starting to ache from weakness and malnutrition, when I heard someone cry out from the chamber around the corner from mine. "Who is this? How did this happen? Who's done this?" It was the voice of one of our capos. It wasn't said in the tone that capos used to taunt us or to goad us into working harder. That was something different. It was confused, something scared. The other capos heard it in his voice right away and ran around the corner to help. Without guards, we put down our picks and our shovels and hurried to peek around the corner behind them. It was the Judenrat policeman, Holtzman or Finkelstein or whatever his name was. His head had been smashed in with a shovel, and the rest of his body was gashed and torn and bleeding. In the carbide light from a dozen watching headlamps, something glittered and shone in his cuts. Salt. Someone had rubbed salt in his wounds. Like Abimelech in the book of Judges, who sowed the fields of his own people with salt after he put down the rebellion, I remembered reading about him while studying the Torah with my father long before the war. This was punishment and purification all in one. I said, "I want to know who did this," the capo yelled. I looked around from face to face, trying to see who had done it. The men who had accused him in the barracks weren't there. It could have been any of them. It could have been all of them. No one said anything, and I worried we would all be whipped for the crime, but the capo only shook his head. "What do I care if you kill one another? You'll all be dead soon enough anyhow. You and you," he said, pointing to two of the prisoners watching nearby. "Drag his body out of here, weigh him down, and dump him in the underground lake." No one said another word about him. The capos sent us back to our places, and I chipped away at the salt wall again until they told me to stop. That night, I dreamed of the salt statues, that they came to life and set on our captors with their swords, but every one of the statues had the face of the dead man. All right, this section, the Waleska salt mine. Here is a little bit of a picture. This is the entrance to the salt mine with tall spire and train track. So it's like a lookout, I guess. And 9 levels, 186 miles of tunnels, 984 feet below ground level. So this is the Danitwich shaft. This is the actual Waleska salt mine. So here's the entrance, and they go down in the elevator, and this is where they stopped. Okay, and these people have a map, and they've named all the chambers so that they'll know where they are. The Silic chamber, the Kashmir Great Chamber, the chamber the shaft bottom, the Holy Cross chamber, all of this. That's pretty interesting to me. Right. Left, this is a carbide miner's lamp. So they would have had a gas in here, and they would have struck a match, or they had a little metal device that would make a spark, and it would light this. Above is the saltwater lake with a wooden boardwalk above. Of course, the pretty lights are just for tourists. So there's what they would have walked across. And the lake, it wouldn't have been lit at all these lights. They walked in the complete darkness other than the light of this headlamp. It would have been pitch black for Yannick, except for the lights of the miners' helmets, like on this one. Here's the stalagmites in the salt mine. Now, I don't agree. These are stalactites. They're hanging from the ceiling. They hang tight. Mites come up from the floor, but whatever. Above left is a chandelier made from salt crystals. Look how beautiful, guys. It's got, I can't tell. This one looks like it has electricity running to it. which you know they did have in the mine. It looks like a crystal chandelier, but it's made out of salt crystals. And left, this is a miner's pickaxe. This is what he would have used to break the salt loose. Here's the salt carved trolls. And again, for the tourists, they've got lights on them, colorful lights, because to make them look. But this is the real salt mine that we just read about. And then here's the carved royalty and the knights, which is, it's kind of creepy to think that they're still there. Here's the salt cathedral that they talked about. And you see the Christ on the cross and a place for them to take communion and the altars to pray. And there's the beautiful chandelier. And again, this would not have been lit for Yannick and them. After so many months and years of dirty streets and peeling paint, gray uniforms and Spartan barracks, it was astounding that there could still be beauty in the world. That's the famous quote. Spartan means very rough with no comforts. Malnutrition, lacking proper nutrition, often due to starvation. And then here's his quote. It was heavy work. My arms are already starting to ache from weakness and malnutrition. This is an actual picture. And one of these guys is Elie Wiesel right there from the book Night. And when you see the real picture, there's another guy standing right here that they've edited out without his shirt. But you can see how they slept in these bunks and how skinny they were. And their head was shaven. Look at this guy. You can see the bones from his chest. The story of Abimelech, where they killed the Judenrot guy. They took revenge on him. And they talked about, they made gashes in his body and there's salt in his wounds. Well, this is telling about Abimelech from the Old Testament, was an ambitious, unethical, which means he broke the rules, ruler who often waged war on his own people. So he's a bad, evil ruler. Salt can be a symbol. In the Bible, it can signify purification. In the Near East, spreading salt on a conquered opponent's land symbolized cursing them. It was a punishment. And I don't know if you've ever had a sore throat or a sore in your mouth and my mom used to have us gargle salt water all the time. Or if you've gone swimming in the ocean, sort of like a pool, how the chlorine, it'll heal. Like if you have a cut, it heals. It dries things out and heals. It kills bacteria. Salt does. That's why when you have a sore throat or a sore in your mouth, your mama or your granny or whoever might have you swish salt water because of that purification. But Abimelech was the bad guy. So the salt in the wounds of that prisoner, they were kind of using that as a symbol to purify the evil that he'd done when he was a Judenrot.